I really wanted this show to be good. In recent years, as the performative YouTube outrage industry has been preemptively freaking the fuck out over many different shows that even slightly look like they might be getting woke, there's been a tendency among many people to overcompensate by claiming their targets are perfect and above reproach. The Last Jedi is often called a bold new direction for Star Wars that pushed the bar in representation almost entirely because the conservative outrage machine was losing their mind over Holdo's hair color and Rose's existence. The reality that The Last Jedi is arguably the whitest film in the franchise infantilizes most of its non-white cast, uses the rest as bread-tooth mouthpieces, and glorifies the abusive and violent misogyny of its main villain while sidelining the previous male lead in favor of him still remains contentious to this day.
Oh, but it divided the fan base, Lily.
Every Star Wars film divides the fan base, that's not special. A similar issue is found with She-Ra, in that some people will insist that it was unapologetically modernized entirely because cranky baby men had a shit fit about it, but outside of some tired background tropes and a really badly written enemies to lovers plot, it wasn't. It did fare better than The Last Jedi in that it was actually watchable, but it certainly wasn't the revolutionary woke cartoon people sold it as. I did want both of these things to be good, and the fact that they weren't was a disappointment, but I always try not to fall into that trap of overcompensating for internet outrage, which is why it just breaks my little heart to say that High Guardian Spice is not fun. High Guardian Spice is a show about 4 friends going to Magic Warrior Adventuring RPG School to discover their destinies, find themselves, and deal with their incessant mommy issues. Not to be confused with Little Witch Academia, a show about 4 friends going to Magic Warrior Adventuring RPG School to discover their destinies, find themselves, and deal with their incessant mommy issues, and also pick mushrooms. Also not to be confused with The Owl House, a show about 4 friends going to Magic Warrior Adventuring RPG School to discover their destinies, find themselves, and deal with their incessant mommy issues, and also kiss girls. Also not to be confused with RWBY, a show about 4 friends going to Magic Warrior Adventuring RPG School to discover their destinies, find themselves, and deal with their incessant mommy issues, and also beat up stand-ins for Black Lives Matter protesters because the only person on their crew with any actual talent went and died, the selfish prick. The Perspective Crunchyroll original series was always a confusing creature in the lead up to its release. Crunchyroll was producing a nominally family-friendly cartoon that featured diversity and predominantly women on its crew for a streaming service predominantly used by greasy white men to jacket to children in bathing suits. The outrage was palpable, with all kinds of fake arguments filling the airways that never held up to scrutiny. The truth of the outrage is that it looked like it might be progressive, and that made conservative baby men do an anger in their pants. So was it actually the second coming of big gay lady Jesus like they insisted it would be?
No.
I watched the first 5 episodes and I found 2 things of note: the trans guy teacher and Sage's cousin Anise, who has a wife. That's it. The cute gay wives are about the only ones you see with any reasonable frequency, while Professor Caraway is brought out to be the good principal, have one scene where he explains that he's trans to Rosemary, and then gets put back in his cage. The only interesting one of these is Snapdragon, who actually has an arc about coming to terms with her identity and getting help from Caraway in regards to doing it. So that's nice. She actually has a crush on Sage. That's pretty cute. Now, I know what you're thinking.
Because I can read your mind.
Lily, this so far seems rather inoffensive. Why did you open by saying you wished it was good? It sounds good enough. All of those are side characters. Oops. The 4 main characters are all tired stock types dredged up from the worst anime and JRPGs you can imagine. The insufferably twee swordsperson, the insufferably twee mage, the insufferably twee butch, and the ice queen. We're just one pervy creep short of a Tales game. This is where I bounce right off the show completely. It's taken a while to fully grapple with this, but I have zero interest in a show where the main characters are this dull. Many others seem to disagree and seem to expect that the main protagonists will be the least interesting people in the room, and will often adhere to this perception even in shows where this is not the case, but I can't deal with that. A lot of people compare the main cast to RWBY, but I get more of a Beamdog Baldur's Gate vibe here. They remind me of the new characters added to the enhanced editions of Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2. Particularly, it's like having 3 Niras and Hexat in the party. They are over-detailed, over-typecast, and obnoxiously earnest. They're like a pantomime of better ideas out there in the ether, none of which are really expanded upon. I am fully aware that I'm probably alone in this sentiment. I've been aware of that since I watched Little Witch Academia. In that show, there were characters I liked, but they were clearly not the characters that everyone else liked. People kept telling me that the part of the show where Croy shows up is where it gets good, but that was actually where the show really started to drag and lose the momentum it started with. Bad characters really do just kill a show for me, and nothing can really salvage that outside of pulling an Amethyst and just rewriting the character and forgetting everything that came before. I imagine at some point they probably go through some character development that makes them less boring, but saying it gets better later really isn't a point in its favor. More often than not, that's just something people say to get you to keep watching in the hopes that you'll validate the things they like. And indeed, of what I saw, there were inklings of character development, inklings of backstory, inklings of depth, but none of it actually paid off, all seeming to be teases for future episodes. Oh boy, Rosemary has a missing mother? Maybe one day we'll talk about that. Sage has an overbearing traditionalist hypocrite of a mother? Maybe we'll do something with that one day. Parsley has a mother who wants to hoist parental responsibility for her siblings onto her? That's actually the only good episode of the show because they actually explored it. Time has a strained relationship with her mother? Maybe we'll elaborate one day. That's 4 characters with mommy issues, 3 of whom are just established in the hopes that maybe they'll do something with it. Past Present is about the only episode that's actually interesting to watch because it sets up an issue Parsley has with her family, and then the episode is about that. She has to deal with it that episode. That's not a tease for future content, that's just what the episode is about. But that very same episode finally gives us a clue as to why Time is being all Lindsay Ravenson all over the place, and the answer is mommy issues again. But that still just leaves a tease for a future episode. Every episode seems to imply something satisfying is maybe going to happen eventually. You can have all the fantastic magic school premises you like, but if most of the time the end result is, wow, you sure have some issues, I bet a future episode might bother to deal with it, those episodes are completely wasting their potential. Of course, it's obvious why they're doing this. If they let out teases and implications, they can hook the fan theory brigade into speculating forever, pulling out all the weird, shocking twists they can think of that might happen, and boom, you've got an addicted sucker for the rest of your career. Steven Universe did this, Star vs. the Force of Evil did this, Warcraft's been doing it lately, and like Warcraft, High Guardian Spice wants to fleece a subscription fee from you. The season finale ends with them having a boss fight, dubbing themselves the titular High Guardian Spice and being friends. In a better version of the show, that would have been around episode 3, not the first season finale. In a bid to be fit for streaming, they have 5 episodes worth of content and 7 episodes of teases for future seasons. A good version of the show wouldn't have had 3 copies of the same character and 4 characters with the same underlying issues. It's not even that I'm against characters with mommy issues, I wrote those characters and love them, just not all of them. All of this reeks of a show that didn't really have a whole lot of ideas and just wallpapered over everything with stock anime tropes. I'm half expecting Rosemary to yell Demon Fang at some point. Hell, the other characters aside from Rosemary all look like they were ripped from the default RPG Maker set. A show can survive a lot of things. Bad animation, bad dialogue, bad timing, even bad ethical principles. I mean, why else is anime so popular? But bad main characters are the worst problem to have. I'm even struggling to talk about them in any capacity because they are just that dull and boring. Even their own descriptions on Wikipedia struggle to say anything about them. Time is particularly egregious. People expected me to like her because she's moody and looks vaguely like Anave, but honestly, I hate that trope the most. Having characters who are just moody and bitchy for no reason, or more accurately, reasons that are implied in tease for future episodes, has never appealed to me because I was that bitch as a teenager, and you're not endearing for being like that, which is intentional. You're trying to push people away by being unlikable, but deliberately unlikable is still unlikable. I only like this particular trope when it's used to accent something about a character. When characters put on that mask, it works because you already know why they're like that and who they actually are underneath. Starting with them like that is a shortcut to a trope that you're using purely for its own sake. No doubt they'll explain why Time is like this eventually and have her come out of her shell, but that trope is so played out that I just don't care. I guess it makes sense because High Guardian Spice is an original series made by Crunchyroll, and anime as an industry has about 12 tropes between them and only 2 of them were ever any good. It's a Western anime made by people who love those tropes. You give your average weeb a budget and this is what they'll make. Well, this or Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. But even if High Guardian Spice had been great, I still wouldn't recommend it because it's a Crunchyroll original, and I can't really suggest buying a whole streaming service for one show. If you don't already have Crunchyroll, it's probably because you don't like anime, and getting a subscription for a service that delivers anime for one cartoon is probably the worst decision you will ever make in your life. As it stands, I really wish this had been better, because it had way too much preemptive backlash over nothing, and even the post-release criticism it gets from a lot of people involved in that has been completely rancid wastes of time. Sadly, it's not, and that's just a shame.